afternoon, Easton, and welcome to the Rabbi's Roundtable. I'm Rabbi Peter Hyman, and you are seated with me at the Rabbi's Roundtable. And we come to you from the studios of MCTV in the basement of the AVALON Theater. I have what I think will be a very interesting show, two very engaging guests, a little bit of information about programs coming up that I want you to be aware of, and if you have time and are so inclined, take advantage of. Both are sponsored by Temple B'nai Israel. The first is the Hal Israel Memorial Lecture, which will take place on June 14th at 7:30 at Temple. The Hal Israel Memorial Lecture this year will feature Ira Foreman, and his topic is Worldwide Anti-Semitism in 2017, Not Just a Jewish Problem. And he's going to address a number of issues, including obviously anti-Semitism, but Islamophobia and other issues that seem to be percolating on the horizon and affecting all of us. So if you're interested in the Hal Israel Memorial Lecture on Wednesday, June 14th, please call Nancy at the Temple. The number is 410-822-0553 and make a reservation. My first guest is heading up the second interesting program that's coming down at Temple, and that is the Summer Institute. And to talk about that and to share some ideas and notions, it's my pleasure to have Dr. Stephen Goldman at the Rabbi's Roundtable.
Thank you.
Stephen, welcome. Aside from being a what's your
Periodontist.
a periodontist, he is also, interestingly, a collector of newspapers. And the program on the Summer Institute on June 25th is Journalism and the Presidency, Past and Present, how important and poignant and powerful a topic given what's going on. So welcome, and let's get started. We will put the flyer up. Tell us something about your background. How did you get started in collecting newspapers?
That's the question that everybody asks.
I'm sure.
Well, first of all, I'm a periodontist, so I've practiced periodontal treatment for the past 40 years and retired from it in 2014. I moved down to Oxford, Maryland in 2013.
Cool.
But for the past 40 years, since 1969 on, I've been a very serious collector of historical newspapers. That's been my avocation and it's been my passion. And it seems as though it's really taken over in a lot of ways because I've been doing that for the past 40 years, and now I'm really in the full-time business of buying and selling historical newspapers.
That's fascinating. One question: where did you put them all?
I have a warehouse.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
My wife won't let me bring any more home. So they're now in a warehouse.
I feel your pain, but that's a different issue. This is really interesting. Tell us, what are your favorites? What are some of your most cherished ones, the most valuable? How far back does the collection go?
Well, the collection goes from the 1500s, from the 16th century. The earliest ones are maybe 1560, 1570, before they had newspapers. In those days, they had illustrated news broadsides, which were copper plate engravings with text at the bottom in either French or German or Dutch, and these captions at the bottom are in rhyme because they were meant to focus on a population in Europe that was largely illiterate, and they could read the papers by seeing the pictures. They didn't really know what it meant, and somebody would read the text at the bottom, and being in rhyme, they could remember it just like people today can remember rock and roll songs from when they were children.
Right.
That's exactly what they did back in those days. So that was the earliest. I collect news books from the 17th century, which were pamphlet type books, usually on a single subject. And then in the 17th century, early 17th century, you start to see newspapers come along. And the first of which was the London Gazette in 1665. It was called the Oxford Gazette because the royal family had fled London to Oxford because of the plague, and they stayed there for the first 23 issues, and then the 24th issue, when they moved back to London, was called the London Gazette.
Wow. So the earlier ones from the 15th and 16th, are those copper plates that you have? You don't have, they're not paper.
Yes, they're paper. They're
Really?
rag paper.
How did you get them?
That's a very long story.
Yeah,
The answer is, after a certain period in time, people call you up because they know about you. And
Okay.
I've been buying and selling for the past 40 years because in order to be a collector at a certain level, you have to be a buyer and a trader,
Sure.
Trader,
Right,
trader,
right.
and you have to be able to trade papers with other people. And so you have to get, if you have duplicates, you have to get duplicates so you can trade with other people. And basically that's how I was able to obtain a lot of those. In the days before the internet, I sent out mailings to all of the book dealers, historical societies, libraries in the country. And even though it was a very small response, there was a significant number of these facilities that wanted to get rid of their excess newspapers, and I was there to buy them, and I bought them by the truckload, and that's why I have a warehouse full of them at this particular point.
And do you go through all of them yourself? And
I try to take out the highlights, but some of the ones that don't have highlights are really quite interesting, and I've always been fascinated by the fact that in the past 5 to 6 centuries, that even though the people's names change, the human nature stories do not change. They're all the same.
absolutely. That's a sermon that I give in every class I teach, but we won't go there. But yes, that's exactly correct. What's your favorite?
The favorite is one, well, first of all, you should know that in 1996, I was contacted by a museum that was being built in Roslyn, Virginia, which turned out to be the Newseum.
Well, we're gonna well, tell us about your connection to that. I was going to ask about that.
In 1996, I got a phone call on my answering machine. You remember answering
I
machines?
do remember answering machines.
And
yes.
when I got home from work, I listened to it, and they wanted to know if I had a New York Daily News dated January 15th, 1928, which was a very strange thing to leave on my answering machine. So I called them back the next day, and I said, I know what you're looking for. I said, but who are you? And they said, well, we're the Newseum. We're building a museum of news history, journalism history in Roslyn, Virginia. And I said, well, who's behind this? And they said, the Gannett Foundation, the Freedom Forum, and it's being built right now. And they're the ones who I'm calling for. So I said, well, who is heading this? And they said, Eric Newton. So I said, could you give me his number? And I called up Eric Newton and I asked him about this museum. I said, you left a message on my answering machine, and I know what this newspaper means, but who are you? And so he spent about 20 minutes explaining to me what it was all about. And at the end of the conversation, I said to him, Eric, you don't know me, but you need to know me. And he said, why do I need to know you? He said, come to my house and you'll see.
Cool.
About a week later, he came over with some other people from the museum, and they spent 2 hours in the house. And about an hour later, I got a phone call, and they wanted to hire me as a consultant. And the rest, as they say in history, for the first 4 years of the museum, when it was in Roslyn, Virginia, I lent them about 75 or 80 papers to display in their news history gallery.
Wow.
And then in the year 2000, a property became available in Washington, D.C. on Pennsylvania Avenue at 555 West Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest. And the museum ended up buying this property, which was at the time occupied by the Washington Social Services building. And it was about a half an acre lot. It was right next to the Canadian Embassy. And they bought the building and the lot, and then they knocked down the building and built the most expensive museum ever built privately on the face of the earth.
I know that. It's very cool. I've been there.
And then in 2001, they decided they couldn't live without the collection, so they ended up buying it from me.
Oh, how cool! And do you still consult with them at all?
I do.
Excellent.
I do.
Let's shift. It's very fascinating and good for you. And it's actually kind of mind-boggling to think what you have preserved, literally in history. And Good for you. So let's talk about the Summer Institute.
Okay.
And the topic, as I said before, is journalism and the presidency, past and present. You're going to be doing that, and you're going to be doing that along with Michael Friedman. Tell us about Michael Friedman real
Well,
quick.
Michael Friedman is a professor of journalism at George Washington University. He lectures there quite frequently. He's on the board of the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., and he's also a consultant for the museum, and he does a radio program called the Caleb Report, where he talks about journalism history. I met him because he's also a collector of historical newspapers, and we became friendly, and when I was asked to do the lecture for the Summer Institute, I immediately thought of him and thought it would make a real nice duo.
Yep.
I could talk about the history of the presidency from George Washington through Donald Trump, the historical perspective, how newspapers covered it, how they got it wrong, how they got it right, how even though most people think that the 2016 election was the most vicious in history, I'm going to talk about how it was not by any means. Michael Friedman is going to talk about history of the presidency from a perspective of the last few years. He's very, very involved with journalism at the present, how it's evolving, and I'm going to talk about the journalism in the past, and we're going to talk about it from the perspective of the presidency.
I think that's fabulous. I'm appreciative to the both of you that you are doing this, and obviously it's timely, it's current, it's important. The Summer Institute, as I said, at Temple B'nai Israel will be held on Sunday, June 25th. It will run from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. We're going to put all this information up on the screen. Reservations are necessary, and reservations are $25, which includes lunch. So if you're interested, call 410-822-0553. That's the Temple office, and register. Given the rhetoric of the current circumstance, are you worried? Does it disturb you? Briefly, because we don't have a lot of time, but just as as a student of this, in far more informed than maybe many of us are, what's your response to the notion of fake news? I mean, as a citizen, I find it offensive.
Yes, but first of all, I'm a student of history, and I don't look to the future. That's not what I do. But if you look back in history, it's always been like this. When John Adams was running against Thomas Jefferson, the candidates themselves did not go out and campaign. You know, campaigning by candidates is a relatively new phenomenon. They sat in their house and they had surrogates do it for them. So they had surrogates through, in those days, newspapers, who would put essays in newspapers, either blasting or in favor of a particular candidate. And in those days, not unlike today, newspapers had their favorite candidates, and some of the newspapers were actually subsidized by the candidates themselves. The Gazette of the U.S. was a Federalist paper back in the days of George Washington and John Adams, and of course it supported the Federalist cause. And Thomas Jefferson had his own newspaper as well, the National Gazette by Philip Freneau, and that newspaper supported Thomas Jefferson, and never the twain shall meet. They were very vicious in language that was used at the time. We use visualization now, they didn't use that, they used words. And back in those days, people knew what the words meant. When they started having engravings in newspapers, they would use engravings to denigrate their opponents. They would use political cartoons. An example of that would be during the American Civil War, when Abraham Lincoln was running against the Southern Democrats for the presidency. There was a very famous cartoon of Abraham Lincoln carrying a black on his back, and it was basically used to show his connection to the anti-slavery abolitionist movement, which, if you were a Democrat, was anathema, and that didn't appeal to your base. So that was a way to show where he was on a particular topic of that time. Today, you'd look at it, you'd say, well, this is not really a a very vicious cartoon, but in the day it was.
Certainly, certainly. Well, this is going to be a very exciting program. We're grateful to you and to Professor Friedman for taking the time to do this. Again, the Summer Institute at Temple B'nai Israel, which will take place at the Oxford Community Center in Oxford, Maryland, on Sunday, June 25th, from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., featuring both Steve and Michael, will be fascinating, important, and valuable. So I urge you to call Temple and make reservations. Thank you for being on the Rabbi's Roundtable.
Thank you very much for having me.
We'll get you back because there's a whole lot more to talk about.
There's a lot more, yes.
There's a ton more to talk about. We'll be right back, Easton. Thanks.
We are MCTV, Midshore Community Television. We want your help in making our station more robust so that we can better serve the residents of Talbot County. So, how can you help? If you are already making video content, submit that content for broadcast to the station. It's free! Are you involved in events, shows, or lectures that would be of interest to the community? We can work with you to figure out the best way to capture those events for airing on MCTV, be it training, equipment rental, or hiring our production staff to film at a reasonable rate. Do you want to produce your own show? Let us help you get started. Come be a part of this valuable community resource. Email the station at nick@avalonfoundation.org or visit us in the basement of the historic Avalon Theater at 40 East Dover Street in downtown Easton.
And we are back, and you are seated at the Rabbi's Roundtable. I'm Rabbi Peter Hyman, Rabbi at Temple B'nai Israel, and we are coming to you from the studios of MCTV in the basement of the Avalon Theater. And my second guest is a dear friend, a skilled physician, and somebody who I love to hang with, Dr. Ahmed Gawad. And welcome to the Rabbi's Roundtable, Doctor.
Thank you for having me.
And we're going to shift from news to holidays and holy celebrations, because Ramadan, the holy month of Ramadan, starts on May 20. Is today the 26th?
It actually should be tomorrow.
Tomorrow, great. Like Jewish holidays, the holiday starts at night, or no?
Tonight will be the first night.
Yes.
And tomorrow will start.
Right, yes. So Ramadan starts on May 27th, and I thought it would be important for us to share with the community what Ramadan is, how it's celebrated, and just broaden our perspective for a lot of reasons. So thank you for being here.
Sure.
And let's talk a little bit. First, tell us about yourself.
So my name is Ahmed Gawad. I actually grew up in Cairo, Egypt, and my parents moved to Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. For a while, my parents taught in high school, and then I went back to Cairo in 1980 to attend medical school, and till 1993. Then I moved to Buffalo, New York for 3 years of residency. My wife said no more. Single day after finishing residency, we moved to Maryland. We came to Cambridge in 1996. We had the kids in Buffalo. My daughter was 4 days old when we moved here.
Wow.
My son was 15 months. And since then, Cambridge and Easton have been home for us since 1996.
And how fortunate for us that,
Well,
that,
thank
that
you.
your wife made you do this. Well, terrific. So let's talk a little bit about Ramadan.
Sure.
It's celebrated for a month.
Right. So Ramadan is it's a month of the Islamic calendar, which follows the lunar months.
Correct.
So what will happen is every year the lunar month is 11 days shorter than the Gregorian calendar. So Ramadan comes early 11 days every year. So at some point it was in the winter, now it's in the summer.
Yep.
It's the beginning of the month starts with the sighting of the crescent,
the new moon.
just the beginning of the new moon.
Yep.
And at that point it's across the Islamic world, all the way from Indonesia and Japan all the way to the Western Hemisphere. People start at the same time. We observe fasting, which involve no drinking, no eating, no sexual relations, no foul language. Really, you have to behave your best.
Right.
for a month from sunrise to sunset. Once the sunset, we start to drink and eat, and people are more observant during this month. It's supposed to be more of a disciplinary month.
Sure.
You do your best. You're supposed to pay your zakah, which is more of a charity that you're supposed to
Right.
give to the community. People usually show their best behavior, and it's just more of a you're more appreciative of everything God gave us. We appreciate the simple things in life, like water, like food.
Right.
And one of the purpose behind it, it's one of the pillars of Islam, is so you can feel the pain that other people who are not as blessed as you are, and hopefully that makes you more compassionate and more willing to give for charity.
Absolutely, and whether it's Islam or Christianity or Judaism, one of the things that holidays do, whether it's specifically or by intent, is to focus on those characteristics and qualities in a human being that should make us better.
Absolutely.
So whether it's giving charity and dealing with those elements, or just a sense of personal growth and appreciation, the holidays, they're magnifying glasses, and so are there celebrations within Ramadan that end the fast, or?
So usually the month itself is more of time for reading the Holy Book and praying and making prayers to God and being more grateful and appreciative and thankful. But usually the holiday comes at the end of the month with the beginning of the new moon, and people celebrate, and there's a prayer in the mosque that everyone goes to. And then people go visit. They get their new sets of clothes. Kids usually get the more money, or what we call idea, to buy whatever they want.
Right.
But it's mostly about visiting relative, connecting with people that you haven't connected with.
Nice.
And it's said that you cannot fast if you have been separated from a friend or a relative for more than 3 days. That nulls your fasting. If I get angry, if I get upset, if I do anything mean, it nullifies my fasting. And it's very common that people, when they get upset and they getting heated, they will say, "Oh, can't get heated, I'm fasting,"
Right.
and they just simply say, "I'm sorry," and they walk away. So it's something that shows us this is what you're supposed to do the whole entire year, but you have to be very
Absolutely.
observant.
It's actually kind of brilliant. And I, as you're speaking, I'm thinking about the Day of Atonement. It's only one day, but where we suspend all normal operations of existence and focus on who we are, what we've done, both good and not good. And one of the things that we're to do is to make amends with those folk we've offended and apologize. Otherwise, all the other stuff is null and void.
Right, and
You know?
that's a common theme that you
Absolutely.
see now in the messages going around the internet. People asking people for forgiveness for anything that they have said or
Yep.
hurt their feelings.
Yep. I mean, that's there's a human element in all of this that transcends theology, and those things that make us better, or at least focus our attention on how much work we have to do.
Right.
That's really good. So, I know at the end of each day is each day at the end an iftar.
Right, that's when with sunset we wait until the sun sets, and then we start to have food and drink, and then people usually go to do the prayers. A lot of times people who don't go to the mosque the whole entire time, this will be the one time of the year that they want to go there and pray. So it's just more of a reminder. think of God a little bit more.
I'm chuckling only because human beings are human beings, and for us, the High Holy Day season is when most people who never come during the year.
You see them at this time.
Sorry, I apologize. It's just
But it's true.
the cynicism
It's true.
of my rabbinical perspective, but that's okay. No, this is, and so it's a full 30 days.
Well, it's more, again, because remember, this is going by the lunar calendar,
Right.
which can be anywhere between 28
20
to 30
that-
days.
That's correct.
And
That's
sometimes
right.
you'll see a difference,
Yeah.
and occasionally across the Islamic world and the the Islamic countries, you will see some countries decide that they saw the moon, they sighted the moon early,
Yeah.
and they may start fasting early or even have the celebration early. So we don't have, as of now, we don't have 100% consensus on when people sight the moon for the first time, and you may see that 1 or 2 day difference.
Very interesting. Well, thank you for taking the time
Sure.
to
My pleasure.
for being at the Rabbi's Roundtable and for sharing with us some insights on Ramadan. As they say, and on my side of the fence, I hope it's an easy fast.
As we say, inshallah.
Yeah, inshallah, God willing,
Yes.
and Ramadan
Thank you
Mubarak.
so much.
And Dr. Gawad, thank you for being at the Rabbi's Roundtable.
It's my pleasure.
And
Thank you.
Easton, remember we have the 2 programs coming up at Temple B'nai Israel, the Hal Israel Lecture Series on June 14th at 7:30 at Temple. And we also have what will really be another interesting program, the Summer Institute, dealing with journalism and the presidency, past and present, on June 25th, Sunday, June 25th. If you're interested in participating and you want to attend, please call Temple, 410-822-0553. Again, Dr.
Thank you
Gawad,
again.
thanks so much.
My pleasure.
Easton, we will be back. Thanks for being at the Rabbi's Roundtable.